Hello everyone, I'm Morgan and I'm going on a year-long art journey. Previously, I went to school for oil painting. I graduated about, 8 years ago now. That's crazy. Since then, I've been doing other jobs that have nothing to do with art. And as such, unfortunately now my skills feel pretty rusty. They're just not where I would like them to be 8 years after school. I would prefer to have a career with my art by now. However, I'm just now starting to get warmed up and really moving forward with the life that I want with my art. So what I'm trying to accomplish with this journey, I'm using Marc Brunet's Learn to Draw in a Year as a guideline to help me get back into practice. I'm hoping to see my technique improve. As you can see, my line work is really needing some help. I also want my visual library to get back to where it was and to grow. As you can see, a lot of my figures are pretty flat. They don't have that dimensionality to them that I would like to see. I understand that these are simply gesture drawings where, really that three-dimensionality isn't quite what you're looking for, but there should be far more form to them. For reference, here are some of the gesture studies that I was doing around 2017-2018, and I feel that you can see my technique is so much better in them. The flow through from the forms is so good. The line work in them still pretty scratchy. With my gesture drawings moving forward, being able to look back and see the work that I've done in the past and now, I realize I need to work on single line pass-throughs. Hopefully in the next video, that's what you will see. But just comparing these older drawings to the newer ones, you can see where instead of focusing on every finger in the hand, I was just making 1 or 2 lines for the entire hand, and it looks so much better as a gesture study instead of, over convoluted figure work that I'm trying to make these be. And they don't need to be those. They should be very simple and very quick drawing. As you'll see, these studies are 25 through 30. I did the first 24 on my Surface tablet. I feel like those studies went much better, and I'm not sure if it was just the smaller space that I forced myself to work in on the computer, or if it was the tools I was using. I feel like I was able to achieve line variation where I wanted it more with the tablet pen instead of using this weird colored pencil that I just picked up for whatever reason. These studies still have follow-through problems. However, I feel like the proportions are much better in them simply because it's so much easier to correct on the computer instead of having to erase everything and redraw it. All I have to do is select what I want to fix and resize it within the canvas. I think part of what led to the issue with this is Marc Brunet outlined that these should be like 2 to 5 minutes, and I think I relied on that a little too much. I'm not somebody coming into art for the first time. I already have some experience, and as such, I should have just went with like 90-second drawings instead, which would have forced me to focus more on getting out multiple studies instead of trying to create masterpieces in the 2-minute time that I had. Another thing that created issues with these ones, at least in the Moleskine sketchbook I was working in, was the use of pencil. You get a pencil in your hand that you immediately just want to start kind of scribbling and scratching with it. And instead I should have been working with something like a thicker brush pen or some charcoal, or even just a 6 or 8B pencil that's a lot softer, that allows you to get those lines down quickly without much effort on your behalf. So moving forward, I'm going to be doing gestures on a large newsprint, probably with charcoal, or maybe, like I said, with that brush tip pen. I just feel that it will force me to follow through from the top of the figure down to the bottom and then carve out from there and not get hung up on the details as you see me doing in here. There's no reason for me to be worrying about muscle inside of a gesture drawing. Really, when I was watching this back, I was surprised to see where my proportion issues were stemming from. I obviously knew I was having them, but it seemed like the ones where I put down the head first caused the most problems. When I just started with some random other part of the body instead of focusing on the head, that allowed me to build the body in proportion to itself and then add the head in proportion as like a final touch. So that was interesting. That isn't a problem that I would normally associate with myself. I think the reason for that is typically, I'm mapping and measuring my piece a lot to ensure that everything is in proportion, whereas these are, I'm just trying to get it down on the page and move on to the next one. So maybe that's an issue I always have, and I'm just not aware of it because I go through and fix it as I map and measure out other pieces of the body. I know what I'm saying might sound a little harsh on myself, but I think it's great to critique yourself and to see what you need to improve on. And having this video to look back on makes that so much easier. Even if you're not going to upload it like I have, I would recommend recording some of your progress every now and then and watch it back to see, oh, I was having this problem and I didn't really think about it, but now that I see it, I can tell myself I need to focus on that for the next time. And really, I'm hoping that's what this series will be, is more of like a journal or a diary for myself to look back on, in 3 months, or as half the year goes by and then finally at the end of the year, just to compare how much focusing on actually practicing can improve my art. So there we are, wrapping up the end of the gesture study section. I'm so grateful for the insights I've already gained from just doing this and recording what I have, and I just know that continuing to do this for the rest of the year is really going to improve my art in ways that I couldn't expect it to. Next up is basic one-point perspective in simple volumes. I'm using the book Frame Perspective by Marcus Mateo Mastery. I did the fundamentals off screen and selected some of the exercises I did to include in the video. I already own this book because I'm terrible at perspective. I have attempted to go through it before, but got too hung up on making every line perfect. I decided to work freehand for the most part this time, and focus more on what was actually being taught. Perspective is something that I'd really like to get down, not only for better form in my figures, but also because I'd like to make several comics. The comic I'm presently working on is in the scripting phase. I plan to have the script finished by the end of March, and it will then be made available to the bounties tier on my Ko-fi page. Needless to say, perspective is so crucially important to understand when constructing environments and having characters interact. In my previous comic attempts, it's a skill you can clearly see that I lack. By the way, if you want to see the rest of this comic, I'll link to it in the description. It was my college capstone project that I never finished. One day, I want to reboot it once I'm more comfortable telling stories and have my art muscles toned. Besides comics, perspective aids in paintings, illustrations, even simple standalone character art. It is such a valuable tool to have, and I can't wait to see how my art changes due to it. As for the exercises in the video, you can see that I am kind of struggling my way through them. I clearly understand the basic of, okay, so this line comes out from the center, anything above the horizon line, you see the bottom of it, anything below the horizon line, you see the top of it. However, constructing those shapes according to where the horizon line is and the lines coming out of it, I guess perspective lines, is something that I am still very, very shaky on. And I just lack the confidence that I really need to put the line down, leave it alone, and make that shape legible. And while I'm calling these exercises, they're not specified that way in the book. They're just examples, as you can see on the screen, alongside of his writing, and I just copied what he drew as a way of applying the knowledge that he had written about. For the most part, these exercises are not that difficult. You'll see where occasionally I make something too big or too small, or I just throw something in there to take up the space because I messed something else up. They are just exercises, so I'm fine with it not being good, even. I do feel like I came away knowing and being able to understand and put down shapes better after doing this first chapter. I plan on doing one chapter a week or so in this book. I'm not really sure what to say about perspective that I haven't already. I barely worked on it in college. We did, I think, one assignment that had to do specifically but with perspective, and I really should work more on it outside of just these exercises and hoping it goes well in my final pieces, because it typically does not. And as I said, with the comic, it'll be super important, not only for the structure of one scene, but for recreating those environments and other scenes, and having a cohesive story that makes sense from one page to the next. I do plan on doing a bunch of master studies at some point. I've already gone through and picked out some artists that I would like to copy, one of which is Ivan Bilibin. I think that's the way to say it. He was a Russian comics artist back in 1904 or something. I'll have to look up. I have a section on him later in this video, so by then I'll make sure to have the information correct. His artwork is deceptively simple. It's an Art Nouveau comic, I guess. His illustrations come off so effortlessly correct, and I just want to understand how he composes his pieces while also using perspective to his advantage to tell a story. His illustrations are called comics. They were more like picture books, from my understanding, maybe even like a young reader's chapter book. And so these illustrations I made for comics really stand alone by themselves. And they're really good about telling a story without having the words to accompany them, or without having the panel before or the panel after. And part of that is his understanding of perspective and having a beautiful sense of composition that I really want to study and share with you guys at some point. As far as other perspective works, I've done a lot of still lives throughout college. I guess there was some perspective involved with that. But really, I rely a lot on mapping and measuring, and I feel like that handicaps me a little bit when it comes to perspective. I'm not understanding the basic form of the shape, I'm just relaying it in a 2D space without understanding the 3D form of the object. And so I want to improve my ability to convey and understand that 3D form, and not just rely on, jazzing something up with shading or line work or color. I really want the most basic, simple illustration or drawing of something to make sense without having to rely on tricks to make it look good. That is something I hope we can see progress as my understanding of perspective changes. I don't really know what I want to work on with perspective as of this moment. Like I said, I was just kind of mindlessly copying the examples in Mr. Mateo's book. Hopefully next time I'll be able to see more what I need to work on, because I will be creating a simple scene out of one-point perspective and simple objects and stuff like that. So I guess right now, here are some exercises you guys could also try. I highly recommend this book and his other series, which is called Framed Ink, if you're interested in making comics. These books are great. I know that by following them and actually working with them this time instead of just flipping through the pages really fast, that I will gain an understanding that I do not have right now. Our final section for this video is artist studies. For these studies, I focused on the line work of the art. I chose 3 artists whose work I admire, the first of which is Alphonse Mucha. Mucha is probably the most well-known Art Nouveau artist. He was a Czech painter known for his commercial works, especially those featuring Sarah Bernhardt. I first encountered Mucha's paintings in college and was blown away by his paint application. I was so impressed by how flat and clean his works were. They almost appeared to be digital. Coincidentally, this is also how I found out about gouache, as I relayed these impressions to my teachers. The piece I chose to study from is a sketch of a young woman holding a trailing bouquet of flowers. I chose this sketch because the line work was very evident and it had great shapes to play with. As for why I chose to do all of these studies with a G pen, I'm not sure. This study in particular would have gone much better by using a 6 or 8B pencil. The G pen was also hard on this paper, which I knew about beforehand, so I honestly have no idea why I made the choices I did. The next time I do studies, I'm going to plan things out far better before ever touching the paper. I also need to take more time doing these. These ones were pretty rushed since I needed to film them in order to get this video out close to when I originally planned to. Hopefully, after this month, I won't have to play catch up as badly and can take my time making quality studies and pulling information from them. What really draws me to Mucha's work is his ability to convey mass and form with such little value change. A great part of this, especially in his commercial work, is due to his line weight. In general, the outside of his item of interest has the heaviest line. This helps greatly to separate it from what is typically a busy border and sometimes busy environment. The bolder line contains the inner workings of the shape to create clear and demanding silhouettes. While I have seen many of his works before, this was the first time I think I truly made note of this aspect of his art. Oddly enough, this is something I do most of the time when working digitally. The next area to learn from in the sketch is how he framed the face and gave it importance. People tend to naturally look for faces in whatever they are looking at, but Mucha makes this much easier by creating the highest levels of contrast around the face. He also made sure the bouquet was most detailed closest to the woman's face. In fact, everything below her neck comes off as a suggestion of what is supposed to be there. This may be because that area would be covered up later in text for a commercial piece, but since the face is the most commanding presence on the paper, nothing else needs as much effort put into it. Unfortunately, I botched the face pretty hard. My initial lines were far too thick, which diminished the dimensionality of the eyes. At this point, I realized I was working way too small to make a decent study of the sketch. The face became even worse once I went in with hatching. While it somewhat comes together in the end, the shadows I placed were far too dark and covered more area than in the original work. I also could not keep myself from wondering what his reference looked like. I'm used to making design decisions on my own at this point, so it was frustrating to feel like I was using my design language to copy a work that someone else had already designed. I'm not sure how much sense that makes to you guys, but essentially I'm trying to say it would be nice to see how the flowers, or the woman, or her dress looked as he saw it to see why he made the choices that he did. Otherwise, I'm fairly happy with how this came out. I really enjoyed copying his flower-shaped design and was delighted to be able to make out certain varieties of flowers. I'll probably do some larger pencil studies of his work later, and once I'm comfortable with those, it would be fun to try them in gouache. I'll let the rest of the study play out as a time-lapse, so I'll catch back up to you to talk about my Yvonne Bilibin study next. Okay, here we are at the second study of Ivan Bilibin's Vasilisa the Beautiful. Ivan Bilibin is another Art Nouveau artist. He was a Russian illustrator and stage designer, active from the late 1890s until his death in 1942. Ivan was greatly inspired by Russian folklore, which the majority of his illustrations revolve around. Like many of the Art Nouveau movement, he was also inspired by Japanese block prints. Both of these inspirations are highly evident in his work. His color palettes alone tell wonderful stories and are themselves worthy of study. The compositions of his pieces expertly draw in his viewers and invite them to ask more about the story. I also found out about Ivan Bilibin in college while looking for inspiration for my capstone project. The ornate borders of his works that are not always merely decorative, and the multitude of ways he was able to make the eye move around in his illustrations drew me in. I also loved his shape design, especially his little pine trees. While very little of his pieces feature heavy rendering, he still achieves great depth through his understanding of value. His work is what I hope to achieve in my more graphic works, such as comics. I love how the skull in the foreground pulls you from the right side of the piece all the way over to the left, revealing Baba Yaga's chicken-footed house. This work was far easier to draw with a G-pen, given its highly graphical nature. In fact, it is by far my favorite study of the three that I did. Bilibin also uses the technique of a thicker outline and thinner inner lines to help separate points of interest from the overall piece. Other than getting impatient and using the G-pen on the face instead of the much smaller mapping pen and that tiny foot, I'm quite proud of this one. I believe I was able to draw the gesture of the woman well, which is essential to help convey the lost and wandering feelings she gives off. The tiny foliage was a delight to draw, and I learned a lot about grouping simplified shapes through them. This is also the first time I feel that I achieved the shape of Bilibin's tiny pine trees. And no, I will never get over his tiny pine trees. I love them dearly, and they are too cute to ignore. Adding the final touches to the dress really helped to bring this piece home and give it some life. As I mentioned earlier, I want to do another series on here covering artists I like. Ivan Bilibin is at the top of that list, and some of the things I want to go over is more about who he was, his inspirations, a deep inspection of his artwork and what makes it so wonderful, and to top it off with some studies and an original piece inspired by my findings. If this is something you would be interested in, let me know what you think about my plan, and if there is anything else about him or other artists that you don't believe is discussed enough. Also, who is your favorite artist? Feel free to share them with me in the comments section. I love finding new artists and believe seeing and studying various works is an excellent way to grow as an artist. Once again, I'm going to leave you here with the time-lapse footage. You'll get to see my first hilarious attempt at B-roll footage, and then we'll wrap things up with the Osamu Tezuka Astro Boy study. My final study of this video is an Astro Boy cover by Osamu Tezuka. Tezuka is a name synonymous with manga. He is known for his absolutely insane volume of work, creating legendary characters, and inspiring several more incredible mangakas such as the duo Fujio Fujiko. I'm currently reading the Manga Michi autobiography manga by Fujio Fujiko, and the thrill and utter awe of getting to meet someone like Tezuka oozes from every panel. Initially, when I decided I wanted to study from a piece of Tezuka's, I wanted to do a page from Shintakara Jima, but decided that since the other studies were of only one figure, that is what I should do here as well. And so, I picked an Astro Boy cover. This ended up being a very poor decision. Astro Boy is an iconic character design, and my confidence in my shapes just isn't enough to go toe-to-toe with Tezuka's design. While the inking of this piece absolutely saves the initial pencil sketch, there is still so much that needed to be better refined. For starters, the gesture lacks the energy of the original. While I did manage to get some of the gesture in there, my study feels more stiff than Tezuka's piece. Some of this is due to the position of the head in relation to the chest, but I feel the biggest issues are with the legs. In the original, they don't have much dynamic energy in them either, but mine look like uninspired sausages, and to be honest, that's pretty much what they are. I also wasn't sure how to handle the truncated arm, so it's just there, I guess. This was also the only piece that did not make use of a thicker outline. Instead, Tezuka relies on line weight to help show which parts of Astro Boy are closer to or farther from the viewer. I rarely do this type of line work simply because I'm not great at it, so it seems that doing more of these kinds of studies is on the schedule. After finishing the character art, I realized Astro Boy, just floating around on a random corner of this page, didn't look the best, and decided to copy the background of the original work. This could have been handled better. If I could go back in time, I definitely would have laid in a pencil sketch before inking. Instead, I wound up with this planet that is just some oblong thing that I had to hatch to try to mask it somewhat. The action lines were fun to do though, and they help Astro Boy stand out from the rest of the study. I know I'm being incredibly harsh on this one, but I honestly don't mind how it turned out. Sure, it could be way better, but I think I did okay, given how different Tezuka's style is from my own. He for sure is someone I want to study more to better understand his use of shape and design. January's objectives were more difficult to accomplish than I originally thought they would be. That said, I think my biggest issue was with time management, closely followed by wanting to rush through everything. In the coming months, I'm making sure to work on things throughout the month instead of all at once when I realize, oops, I need to make a video. Despite not being the happiest with how these studies came out, I did learn a lot about where my weaknesses are and how I need to move forward in the future. Hopefully some of the struggles I've spoken about in this video can help you take a look at how to progress in your own art journey as well. Also, a couple questions before I close out. Do you guys like a longer video like this one? Or would you prefer a shorter video that doesn't show the entirety of the studies? I'll also be doing future studies in week-long segments, so would you prefer to see the progress from week to week? Or do you like how I did it in this video, where each objective is grouped together? Let me know what you think, and if you have any other ideas I haven't mentioned. I'll see you next month with February's progress report. Until then, take a look at my other videos, check out my Ko-fi page to see what I'm up to, or catch me over on Twitch where I plan to do more streaming. Take care!